Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of On Campus. My name is Nathaniel Thomas, and I'm joined by Jan Sramek, the CEO and founder of California Forever. How are you doing today, Jan?
We're great. How are you doing?
We're doing wonderful. We're very excited to have you here. For those not in the know, can you give just a brief elevator pitch of what California Forever is trying to do?
We're trying to build again in California and in Solano County, and we're doing that in a few different ways. The first part of the proposal was to build a new community in southeastern Solano County, roughly halfway between Susun City and Rio Vista. That would be walkable, that would be affordable, where there would be a lot of employment opportunities, particularly in advanced manufacturing and defense. And then more recently, we introduced another part of the plan, which is to build what would be one of the biggest shipyards in America, or shipbuilding complexes, actually a collection of different shipyards, on another portion of the property that we own, about 7 miles south of the new city, about 2 miles east of Collinsville, on a coastline that we own on the Susun Bay and the Sacramento Deepwater Ship Channel. And really what we're trying to do is go back to what I think made California great. I think for a long, long time, California was this place of optimism and opportunity in America. People moved here for the California dream. The word California dream came before American dream. We invented it here, and then it became the American dream. And I think a lot of people would agree, particularly young people, would agree that in the last 20 years, it broke. Something broke and something isn't working. And we're trying to go back to what made the state great, but do it in a way that also respects some of the things that we've learned since then about sustainability and about environmental performance. And I think as this gets going and as we start building, Solano County is going to become this really fascinating example for the rest of the state and for the country of how can you build with California values.
Right. Everything that you listed there, we're gonna touch base on. It's a very exciting conversation we have ahead of us. But let's just get to know you
Mm-hmm.
personally first. I know you grew up in the Czech Republic. Can you just paint a picture of what it was like navigating that geography? I know you had to travel for school,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that it was out of the country. So just tell us a little bit about your experiences and how that shaped your perception of what urban fabric should look like.
I grew up in a place that I think probably felt pretty similar to what Rio Vista felt like when it was 1,000 people.
Hmm.
So Rio Vista today is about 10,000 people,
Hmm.
but not too far in the past, it was about 1,000 people. Rio Vista has a very traditional, walkable urban core around Main Street. And it was a small town that was dependent on industry and agriculture. And I grew up in a place that was very much like that. I grew up in my grandma's house, and that town had 700 people. And then we moved into a big town, which had 1,400 people, where my dad grew up. And it was a very blue collar community. My dad was a mechanic, my mom was a teacher, my brother works in construction, my other brother is a truck driver. Um, and so it was very, very small town feel. Everyone knew everyone. It did have that walkability component, which meant that as kids, we had a lot of freedom. And so we could kind of roam around the town. And also, there was really good public transit. And so when we went to school, which I started going to school in the town where I grew up, and eventually I went to school in the big city next door, which was 50,000 people. I could take a bus, and the bus was safe and it was pretty quick and clean. And what that meant is that my parents got a lot of time back that they otherwise would have to spend driving us around. So I could go to school on my own. I could come back from school on my own. When I went to play soccer or basketball after school, I could go on my own. And so it developed a sense of, I guess, independence for the kids, but it gave the parents hours and hours of their time back that I think in America we've lost that sense. And if you have to spend 2 hours every day driving your kids around, it's a lot of time. That's a lot of pressure on particularly young parents or single parents. Um, and That's some of what we are trying to restore here with what we call it.
Yeah, being a parent in 2025 can be one of the most overwhelming undertakings you can do simply because of what you said. There's only 24 hours in the day. And so that's a point that I don't think it's highlighted enough is it's not that you're taking away the kids' autonomy and their sense of sovereignty,
Mhm.
but you're also taking away the freedom of parents
Mhm.
to continue being good parents and to recharge themselves to continue raising good kids. I want to ask how you would contrast the way that you grew up
Mhm.
with the average experience of a child today, where
Mhm.
they are being driven to soccer practice and they're being driven to school and they're not having to navigate the world on their own. They're just sitting in their chairs being driven everywhere.
It's something that I think about a lot. I mean, we have young kids, my wife and I, um, and kind of I think a lot about the way that kind of the way that we've set up the built environment basically influences how we grow up, right?
Mhm.
And I do think that the modern experience of you either in your house looking at your phone or you being driven around by one of your parents and
Mhm.
sitting in the car and looking at your phone again makes it pretty challenging to develop a variety of skills and independence. And one of the things that we have as a one of the design goals that we have for the city as a company, an official design goal that we've put in the company principles is that it should be one of the most kid-friendly cities in the world. And we measure that by saying you should be willing to let your kid walk to school when they are 8 years old alone. And I think that's a really interesting metric because kids are kids are kind of an indicator species. In nature, you have the concept of an indicator species in that if a particular species thrives in an ecosystem, it probably means that the whole ecosystem is healthy and there's lots of other things that thrive. And I think if you design a city that is great for kids, it ends up being great for all of other people. And you can think about what goes into you being willing to send your kid to school alone when they are 8 years old. Well, it means you're not worried that they're gonna get hit by a car. So the roads need to be safe and slow. But you're also not worried that they're gonna be attacked or they're not gonna be a victim of a crime or they're not gonna get abducted. So it says a lot about the quality of public safety in the community. It also says a lot about community relations and the neighbors, right? Part of the reason of why sometimes people are willing to do that, particularly in smaller places, is there's a sense of community and knowing your neighbors, and that is another component that goes into it. And so we think it's a really useful metric to think about when designing a city.
No, that's a fantastic point that you make, and I think it's all the more potent in this time when it's no secret that there is a loneliness epidemic
Hmm.
going on in this decade, and people say, oh, it's because of your phones or because people don't have third spaces as much. But I think that an understated fact is that when you have children being driven everywhere, they're not learning at a young age
Hmm.
to walk alongside people on the street. And maybe when you walk everywhere, you find people with the same routines.
Hmm.
And then now you're forced to maybe give a cordial smile, and all those micro interactions are just lost when you're sitting in a car.
100%. And I think it's a bigger, it's one example of a bigger thing, which is I look at, I think that the way that we've designed our cities um, drives so many of the social ills that we are dealing with today. And a good example to me is I think one of the reasons why a lot of Americans really, really look fondly on their time in college is not just the fact that you're young and you care less and you can do what you want and you can party, but it's also for a lot of Americans, it's the only time when they lived in a relatively walkable place. Number one, where they lived in a place where they lived close to friends, and you could have that spontaneous interaction of you want to hang out and you can just walk over and see them and you meet your friends randomly in a cafe and it that's what creates the sense of community. You talk to people today about what do you want from the neighborhood or from the city where you want to move to or grow up or live, and one of the most common answers is I want a sense of community. And nobody can quite put their finger on what it is. But to me, a lot of that is about you need to create a place where, number one, you give people more time to actually spend with their friends. If you live in if you live in Fairfield or Vacaville and you work in Sacramento or you work in Walnut Creek or San Francisco and you spend an hour and a half every day driving there and back, That's 3 hours out of your day that you're never getting back. And by the way, those are the 3 hours that you probably would have spent talking to your friends or having dinner or being able to go take your kids to a park and or watch their game. So the first part of it is you need to give people time back to actually socialize. Because if you wake up, you look after your kids, you get in a car, you drive for a long time, you drive home after that, you completely knackered at the end of the day. All you have to do is you'll look after your kids, you'll have dinner, and you'll switch on the TV, and that's it. And so you need to give people the time back, and then need to create an environment where you can actually pop out of the house and go knock on someone's door and call someone and be like, "Hey, I'm coming over for dinner. Can I come over? Do you wanna go grab a bite?" And in modern America, the way that we've designed it, you can't do that. If you commute an hour and a half each way for work, and then your friend lives 40 minutes away, how are you going to find the time? You have to come home and then drive to see your friend and then drive home. And you just won't do it. The activation energy is too much. And so by bringing people closer together, bringing them closer to their jobs, bringing them to a place where they don't have to be drivers for their or chauffeurs for their kids, that's what gives you the time to actually form community. You need time to form community. And when people kind of nostalgically look back on what America used to be, the small town feeling, a lot of it is all of these components mixed together. And that's what we're trying to design.
Well, yeah, of course, and then you lose that sense of community because of the inevitable death of the downtowns, you know, and I love that you mentioned time because when when I talk to the people in my circles about time, you know, they say we're in one of the most advanced technological ages of human history. Why is it that I have no time? Why is it that I feel so overwhelmed and short of it? Well, it's because you're driving everywhere, and there's nothing you can do while driving. In fact, it's illegal to be a distracted driver. You have to be solely focused on the road. And I love that you mentioned time because relationships take time. You know, you need to be acquainted with someone over and over and over again to develop a relationship with just one person, let alone a community. So I want to focus on also the introvert aspect of this because you know we keep talking about it, community and seeing more people. Well, you know, there might be an introvert that says, "Well, I like being in my own space. I like my isolation." Um, but there are introverts in every city in the world.
Yep.
And you can't underestimate the power of going to a public park, having a nice solitary meal on a bench, but you're still surrounded by people. And that does add to the mental health of even people who don't want to talk. Just being around people, it still uplifts you. Do you
Oh,
agree?
100%. I think it's a totally different experience. It's actually a really perceptive observation that um, um, it's a totally different thing to be an introvert locked up alone in your home in kind of far away, not seeing anyone else, versus being in a great public space like a great park or a great coffee shop or a great public greenway. And I don't think it's an accident actually that I mean most of my introverted friends are actually some of the people who love cities the most. And they love them because they can go and sit in a coffee shop and read a book or work, or they can go and sit in a park, or they can put on their AirPods and go walk through a great park and be alone, but at the same time have a sense of community and always have the choice of move back and forth. Right, you can go and have your long walk in a great park, and then you can go see your friends for dinner. And I think to me, great cities are great cities are about giving people choice. They are about giving people lots of interesting things that they can do in the same place in short sequence without spending a lot of time in the car. That's what great cities are. They take a lot of the best components of the human experience and they put it together, culture um, and entertainment and performance and work and great food and great nightlife and beautiful parks and a lot of their friends and all of their acquaintances. That's what great cities do, and it's not for everyone. Some people really love living in the mountains or living in a farm or living in a small town. But I think one of the challenges that we have in America, particularly on the West Coast, which was really built after the car.
Hmm.
And one of the challenges that we have in Solano County is we don't have enough choice. And so sometimes we get in discussions with people and they say, well, I don't want to live in a walkable city. I like my life in the suburbs. And we say, we completely respect that and we understand that. But did you talk to your kids? And then they say, you know what? Actually, yeah, my kids like living there. And right now, my kids live in Portland and I never see them because they couldn't find that in Solano County. And so even if that's not an experience that someone wants for themselves, I think there's a lot to be gained from having some portion of the neighborhoods in Solano County be like that, because that means that maybe your kids like that, maybe your friend who otherwise moved away likes that. Maybe that's what you don't want when you're 50. You might want it when you're 70 years old and when you don't want to drive or your eyesight isn't so good, and you would like to be able to live in a place where you can walk out of your house and go sit, drink coffee in a little town square and talk to your friends, and then be able to go home. And so I think that all that we're trying to do here is just add more choice to the types of neighborhoods that we have in Solano County. And we think what we are proposing is going to be a really fantastic complement to many of the beautiful and outstanding kind of best in class suburban neighborhoods that you find in Solano County.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic point that you make. And then I love that you bring up the point of parents with their children. Because one of the problems, at least a personal observation of American society in 2025, is that we seem to be clustered with our age groups a little too often. You know, you're obviously through school, you kind of need to be because you're learning things at the same time. Of course, that's fair. But when you leave school, well, then you're clustered into the working force, and then you're clustered into, I don't know, retirement homes, there's no mingling of the different age groups, and then that means there's no sense of community, there's no sense of continuity between the generations. You know, in the Philippines, you have obviously all of the civilizations are walkable because they have to be, and so you'll see 80-year-old and maybe even 90-year-old lolas and lolos walking around, and they get to see the school children running around after school, and that's a very crucial part that I think we've lost today.
In a huge way. And I think, again, economists say there's no free lunch,
Yeah.
but I think that there actually is a free lunch. And one of the best examples of a free lunch, if you want, of a genuine win-win, is the people who are fortunate enough to live, who have little kids, who are fortunate enough to live close to their parents. There's nothing like the win-win from having your parents nearby. I don't have that that good fortune. My mom and dad are still in Europe, but my mom comes over very often, and this idea that we would bring up kids in nuclear families alone, the parents and the kids, is the stupidest idea that we've had in a long, long time. And anyone who has young kids and has the good fortune to have parents knows that. Because if you have young kids, having your parents in the same neighborhood where you can drop the kids off, everyone wins. The parents are over the moon, they can play with the kids. You and your wife get some time for yourself. We were never meant to bring up kids in a nuclear family, living in a single family home in a suburb, far away from everyone in your family. That was never the idea. For 10,000 years, that's not how it happened. It kind of happened for the last 60 years. And I think we know that it's badly broken as a model because fertility rate keeps going down. And a big part of it is just how hard we've made it. And it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, you can design, and a lot of it, by the way, is again to do with the choices that we've made in urban design. For example, in many of the great neighborhoods in America, including in Solano County, if you wanted to find, you might live in a single family home and you might have little kids. If you wanted to find a condo or an apartment or even a very small home where your parents could move to and live next to you or close to you, you can't find it because the entire neighborhood is 2,500 square feet homes and there's no diversity in it. And people have said, well, you can build ADUs in your backyard and so on. I love my mom and dad more than anything. I don't want my mom living in my backyard. There's an optimum distance, and I want my mom living like 5 blocks away. I want my mom living not 5 hours away, not an hour away, but I want my mom living 5 blocks away. And you need to have neighborhoods where um, you have the diversity of different types of units and different sizes of units in the same neighborhood. And it links to you go to a new project today in big parts of the country, and you'll see the affordable housing building on the corner, and then there's the starter home neighborhood, then there's the medium neighborhood, and then there's the executive homes by the lake or on the hill or something. And I think that's a broken model. I think you can't have a cohesive society if you break it up that way. And if you look at some of the renderings that we proposed, one of the things that we like about the type of urban fabric that we proposed is that you could have a row house neighborhood. You could have a row home that is a grand 3,000 square foot mansion and there's a single family living in it. Next to it, you could have the identical building that is also 3,000 square feet, but it's been divided into 3 walk-up apartments that are rented or that are sold. And you can have much more of a social and economic diversity in the same neighborhood. And I think it's great for everyone. I think it means that you can have your parents live close by. It can mean that the teachers can live in the same neighborhood as the school where they teach. By the way, if you have teachers who can live in the neighborhood where they teach, they're gonna teach better because guess what? Their kids are gonna be in the school. And so we've made all of these really unfortunate choices, or not even choices, it just happened. And we should look at what worked and didn't and learn from it and then make neighborhoods better. And that's what we're trying to do.
Well, that's a great point that you make. I mean, I have a family member who is SFPD, who lives in Vacaville, and how much time of his day is lost making that arguably super commute, and that's a recurring theme that we have in these big cities, not just in San Francisco, but in New York and in Boston, where the service workers, the nurses, the firefighters, the teachers, they can't afford to live in the cities that they service. And how are they supposed to be on call to respond to an emergency when they're living 2 hours away? You
Oh,
know?
and I mean, I think it completely breaks the social fabric.
Oh yeah.
And then, just practically speaking, I mean, being be, being in law enforcement is stressful enough, right? Then you put a 2 hour stressful commute in the morning and a 2 hour stressful commute at the back end of it. I mean, it's. I think we can do better, and I think we ought to do better as a society. And I think it's entirely doable. We just need to um, be smarter about how we build cities.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's definitely a lot of thought that can go into these new cities. I want to backtrack a little bit to
Mhm.
what you said about college and how that's the only time in some Americans' lives that they lived in a walkable community. I also say that's why Americans love Disneyland so much.
100%.
You're not driving from the roller coaster to the other side; you're walking it, and there's so much. Um, I guess the only word I can think of is stimulation when you're walking through a walkable city, a place that was designed to be walkable.
Mhm.
Because then all of a sudden the art is human scale, and all of a sudden the entrances and the facades are human scale. Versus, when you look at a freeway sign, everyone knows what the classic green reflective freeway sign looks like. It's devoid of any life.
Mhm.
Because if it was intricate, well, you you can't read it going 65 miles an hour.
Mhm.
And so I hope people can contrast, the lifelessness of a freeway sign versus the lifefulness of the art that exists in these walkable areas and the way that they're designed.
And even small details, right? Like landscaping and front lawns that people have put care into, and better architecture and facades where you can appreciate the detail, and lighting and awnings and benches and all of it. And I like the comparison of so many people in America and in California will go to Disneyland, or they'll go to Disney World, or they'll go to Europe, or they'll go to Asia and rave about the experience and say how incredible it was. And but they don't make the connection of, but we could do that. Like there's no magic in arranging the atoms in bricks and wood in a different way to build a better city. It takes imagination and care and some innovation on the business side, and how do you do it. It's entirely doable. We've known how to do this for a long time. Hell, the entire East Coast was built that way, at least prior to 1920, and so we can do it. And again, not every city needs to be like that. Not every neighborhood needs to be like that. But right now, on the West Coast, broadly speaking, and in Solano County, there's only a tiny, tiny number of neighborhoods where you can get that experience. Um, San Francisco, Santa Monica, parts of Berkeley, and granted, they are dealing right now in many cases with other issues. But if you want to have that experience, it's maybe 1% of neighborhoods or 2% of neighborhoods. And what that means is, because those neighborhoods have become popular with people, actually, I was going to say kind of younger generations, but I think at this point it goes across all generations. What it means is, because the demand outstrips supply by so much, the prices get bid up. And what that means is only the wealthiest people can afford to live in it. That's why those neighborhoods are expensive. Even though today many of them have issues with crime, they are still very expensive. They are still very expensive because people really want to do it. There's only a very, very small number of places where you can do it. It's as if it's as if we had a car market, and we restricted the number of pickup trucks to be 1% of the overall supply. That's what's happening with walkable neighborhoods right now.
Right.
We have 1% of all neighborhoods are walkable neighborhoods. Many more people than 1% of people want to live in them, so they're very expensive. If we said every car maker can make only 1% of their cars be pickup trucks would cost $500,000 because it's really, really basic supply and demand.
Right. And again, I love how you mentioned, the only 1% of neighborhoods are like this. What we're not advocating that every neighborhood in America needs to be walkable. Anyone who's been to Vegas in the summer knows it's nice to have a
Yeah,
car and
absolutely.
to drive from place to place. But it's again what you said earlier. The happiness of a society is when they have a choice. You can choose to live in Vegas, or you can choose to live in Berkeley, where you can walk around. But let's paint the picture for someone, let's say an American who's lived in urban sprawl their whole life. Can you describe to them, like you said, they'll go on vacations and they'll have these grand times. Describe to them what daily life looks like in some of these walkable cities that you have already seen built
Mhm.
in Europe and in who are the shining examples of walkable cities today?
I mean, so as a comparison for what we're building, um, it's going to take a long time for the city to be built out. I mean, that's another aspect that hasn't been fully appreciated. The expected build out for the city is 40 years. And so we would expect the 400,000 resident number is obviously been discussed. That's in 40 years. The actual projection is it's probably, I think our environmental documents that we're working on are saying it's probably 20,000 people by the mid 2030s, 50,000 people by 2039, and 150,000 people by late 2040s. So this is a city at the scale of first Benicia and Vacaville and eventually Fairfield. Kind of that's the scale. So in that realm, I would say the best comparisons are places like Charleston in South Carolina, Savannah in Georgia. They are these medium-sized small towns that have been built before the car. Most of the homes are row homes. You have single-family homes. They tend to be on narrower lots to create that urban fabric, small apartment buildings. Um, Locally, Davis is not a bad example.
That's a great example.
Downtown Davis is a really good example of what we're building. The density would probably be a little bit higher, not by much. You have a really lively shopping street in the middle. Davis has the highest bike share for all trips in the whole, not just in California, but in the nation. That's another thing that we focused on. And so Davis is a really good example. And the long-term kind of build-out trajectory, some people get kind of concerned about it. But I think when thinking about what does this look like on a reasonable timescale of the next 10, 15, 20 years, people should think of we're building Davis between Suisun City and Rio Vista. A little bit higher density, but not by much. And that's the kind of life experience that you might have. And we do have some changes in the plan that we're pretty excited about. For example, we have a system of greenways running throughout the whole city that are completely car-free, where you can bike or you can walk, and they would be great places for example, your kids to take to get to school. But I think that's a pretty tangible example, and people have visited or they can visit and see what it's like.
Well, I'm looking forward to those green spaces. I'll have time to finally bust out my rollerblades.
Exactly.
Uh, how about this? Let's paint a picture for what let's say this town is built in 10 years,
Hmm.
and you already have your projections
Hmm.
of its inhabitants.
Hmm.
Let's and then let's go back to the point I made earlier about these super commuters. I mean, I used to work in downtown San Francisco,
Hmm.
and I know people who would travel far and wide, and the hours of your day are lost, as we've mentioned. If you live in the city,
Hmm.
this new city that you're proposing, what would the average time from the moment you leave your door to get to work be? A target time, right?
I mean, I think at that point in the early days, it's gonna be less than 10 minutes
Less than
because the,
10.
the the city would be quite small just physically at that point, and so yeah, I would expect at that point it's 10 minutes, something like that, and you could walk, you could bike. Um, there's going to be public transit,
Mhm.
and I think what public transit is going to change in a really profound way, an interesting way. We should talk about in a second. I think at full build out. At full build out, the community is about 11,000 buildable acres. It's about 16 overall, but 5,000 acres of that is green space, green belt around it. We have a gigantic central park in the middle of it. Um, and so at full build out, it's about 10,000 acres. That is, for comparison, the city of Vacaville right now is about 18,000 acres.
Mm.
Fairfield is about 27,000 acres.
Mhm.
So it's materially smaller than that. Um, and at that point, at full build out, the longest commute in the city would be 25 minutes probably to get to work if you live really at the other side of the city. One of the ways that we achieve that is the plan for the city is a very traditional American urban grid, which, by the way, is the foundation of almost every city in Solano County. You look at the urban grid in Rio Vista, you can look at it in Benicia, you can look at it in Vallejo, you can look at it in Vacaville. You've got a Main Street, First Street, Second Street, A, B, C, D, E. It's the same pattern. We have changed a couple of things about it. And in particular, we've been inspired by um, super blocks that have been introduced in places like Barcelona and Tokyo, and possibly actually in the Philippines,
Mhm.
now that I think about it. But essentially, we have a system of boulevards that run about every half a mile. Um, and think of them as it's a lane of cars, and then in the middle, there's a dedicated public transit lane.
Mhm.
Dedicated, so there's never any traffic, it's just for transit.
Mhm.
And it's a grid, which means you can get from anywhere to anywhere in the city with one stop. Because you can always, if you go from here to here, you can go here and then here, or you can go here and then here. Lots of different ways to get there. And I think what's exciting is we're building the city just at the time when self-driving cars are becoming a reality.
Mhm.
And so if you look in San Francisco, I hope people have taken a Waymo. If not, I would encourage them. And by the time that we are in construction, very likely what we are running in these dedicated medians is small autonomous shuttles that might be a 4-seater, a 6-seater, an 8-seater. But what it means is the cost of running those is a fraction of running the cost of a big bus that has to have a driver. And so you can really have rapid, easy transportation where you don't have to worry about parking all the time. It can arrive every 5 minutes. You don't even have to have a schedule in mind. You just turn up. And I think it's going to be a really magical experience. And then at the same time, in terms of commuting, we have, in the design of the city, we have built this big industrial zone, which is designed to be the biggest advanced manufacturing zone in California. There's this massive onshoring that is happening right now, defense, aerospace, maritime, and a lot of these companies are going to land here. And then we've put it on the western side of the community. And we've put it there for two reasons. Number one is we've put it there to provide an additional layer of distance from Travis Air Force Base, to make sure that we put homes even further away. So the city is 6 miles away from Travis,
Mhm.
compared to, for example, Suisun City, which is about a mile away from Travis.
Mhm.
There's homes by Walmart that are a mile away from the runway, less than that. One Lake is about a mile away from Travis. we are 6 miles away from Travis. And then within that, the first mile and a half is just the industrial zone.
Mhm.
But we also put it on the west side because we want the people who live in Fairfield or Vacaville or Sassoon to have a really easy commute in. And so we've tried to minimize the distance. And I think it's going to be a great improvement in quality of life for someone who might live in Vacaville or Fairfield when they can get there in 20, 25 minutes and be at work. And the employment centers are right on that side of the city. So you don't have to kind of make your way through the city. I think it's going to be pretty cool.
Right, and even projecting further off into the
Mhm.
distance, it's accessible to people in Northern California, such as Marin County, Sonoma County, Napa, and then also parts of the East Bay, because they'd be able to travel northbound. Uh,
Absolutely. And it's also the other part of it is it's accessible to people in places like Stockton and Lodi.
hmm,
And as you know, a lot of those people right now will drive through Rio Vista, through Highway 12 to the 80, and then take the 80 down to the Bay Area.
hmm,
Well, we certainly think that a lot of the people who might work there might be coming from those places, and that's a big win for the regional transportation system because that means those people never hit the 80.
hmm.
So we can take a bunch of traffic of the 80 and turn a lot of people who might live in Stockton and right now commute to San Francisco in 2 hours into having a half an hour commute to get to the new city.
Right. I mean, it's almost like is it if you envision the freeway systems as blood vessels, you're reducing the blood pressure.
Exactly,
Uh,
exactly. That's a really good analogy. And I think one way to think about it is we have a really dumb distribution of jobs in Northern California. If you think about the Northern California mega region, which increasingly it's not Sacramento and the Bay Area, it's this one mega region, if you want, from north of Sacramento all the way down to San Jose.
hmm,
And right now, what's happening is most of the jobs are between San Francisco and San Jose,
hmm,
and then in Sacramento.
hmm,
There isn't very much in the middle. And what that means is everyone in a lot of people in Solano County, in Eastern Contra Costa, in San Joaquin County, get in a car in the morning and they drive 2 hours to those jobs.
hmm.
If we can actually redistribute jobs in the region and bring a bunch of them to the middle of that region, which is where our property sits, then you can create a shorter commute for people in Solano, in San Joaquin, and Eastern Contra Costa. And what that means is those people are then not hitting the rest of the transportation infrastructure, and so we can do more with less. We can improve traffic without building additional freeways. Now we do need to, for example, widen Highway 12
Hmm.
for sure. Eventually, a new tunnel or a bridge will have to be built in Rio Vista, but we can even out the jobs housing balance across the whole mega region basically, and that's what we're trying to do.
Of course, and of course, no one ever said it was a bad thing to increase construction jobs. So the updates in the infrastructure badly needed in
Yep.
California, that's for sure. Let's talk about we've touched on it, the jobs.
Mhm.
How will the recent Shipbuilding Act benefit this endeavor?
I mean, the shipyard to me is it's probably the biggest and the best example of what we can do for the region.
Hmm.
So when we introduced the project, we came out and said we are going to bring a lot of employment here, and we're going to have a particular focus on advanced manufacturing and defense. And then about a year ago, we announced an initial set of 12 employers. Several of those were in those industries. For example, Hadrian was a company that was in one of those announcements. It's a new company, employs a few hundred people. They are growing very rapidly. They make components for aerospace and defense industries. It's advanced manufacturing, high precision. Um, and we said there would be more of that coming as the project becomes more mature. And then the shipyard is the biggest and probably the best example of that. And so, as people might know, there's a shipbuilding has become a national security priority. Um, it's it's um, it's a very bipartisan issue. We have the executive order on restoring America's maritime dominance that the president signed. We also have the Ships Act that was just reintroduced by Congressman Garamendi, and then Senator Kelly, Senator Young,
Hmm.
and Rep. Kelly. And they both are trying to bring this industry back to the country that used to be very active here. By the way, Bay Area was the biggest center of shipbuilding in America until the 90s when we shut it all down.
Hmm.
Mare Island, obviously, but also Hunters Point and Treasure Island and Richmond and other places. And so Solano has a really, really unique site for that industry. There's all the way down, the site starts about a mile east of Collinsville, and then it goes for several miles. It's that southern coast that we own. It's been reserved for maritime industrial uses since the 70s. So in 1979, Solano County Board of Supervisors created that area. They actually tried to do redevelopment there. And then they reserved it for maritime industrial uses. So it's long been slated for it. It is one of the biggest sites for this industry on the West Coast. And then we've done a lot of work over the last year and a half, bringing it to the point where it's now. But what started out as a long shot is now becoming more and more real, and there's a long way to go. But essentially, we have a lot of legislation that's going to incentivize much more shipbuilding in America, commercial and naval. And we don't have very many places to do it. Most of the shipyards that we have are running at full capacity. And so we're going to need some new places where to do it. And we believe that this is one of the best places in the country to do it. It's been incredible to see how the community has rallied behind it. It's clear there's a long maritime heritage here in Solano with Mare Island, and people want to see that industry come back. And over the next few months, so we've introduced the idea, we've introduced the concept, and then over the next few months, what we're working on is bringing actual specific shipbuilders who would want to build here, and then figure out what that initial project would look like. And I'm hoping that we'll have more to share on that by the end of the summer.
I'm so glad that you touch on the history of shipbuilding in this part of the region. I don't think a lot of people realize that Mare Island Naval Shipyard was the first naval base established in the West Coast
That's
by
right.
the United States Navy. My father was a former shipbuilder.
I was going to ask about it because I know that the reason why the Filipino community is so large in Vallejo and in Solano County, more broadly, is a lot of those stories start by people came to work on Mare Island.
Yeah, I mean, and the reason we were in Vallejo in the first place was my grandfather was part of the U.S. Coast Guard. He joined in 1958 but he was in the East Coast, and then he moved out west after he retired. But that presence was still an influence in my personal history. And to see that come back would honestly invigorate the economy of Vallejo, because it feels like Vallejo. I like to say Vallejo is a literal gem in the Bay Area. It's carved from north to south by the Napa River and from east to west by the Sacramento River. Yet its economy has just been lackluster for ever since the closure of that island. The downtown was decimated, and to be able to see that industry come back, I'm sure would mean a lot for the people in this region. Let's talk a little bit about the annexations and what those implications have for your project.
Yeah, I mean, so there's at a really high level, there's a few different ways to permit what we are doing, kind of entitle the property and control the development. One of those is to build an unincorporated community. And there's lots of places like that exist in California. Arden Arcade is one, I believe, in the Sacramento region. A more local example is Hidden Brook is an unincorporated community. It's outside of Vallejo, or the entirety of the community of Alamo in the East Bay is an unincorporated community. And so that's one way. In that case, it is the county that issues the building permits. It is the county that manages the zoning, the general plan, the sheriff provides services. And that was the initial proposal that we came in with. The other way that it could happen is some of the cities that adjoin the property could decide to expand their borders and basically approve the project by making it a part of Rio Vista also soon. Those are the two that so far have expressed interest in doing it. And so we initially introduced the unincorporated community option. And then at the beginning of this year, Susun and then Rio Vista voted at the city council level to start those discussions. And so we're just starting those discussions with them now. From our perspective, what we've told everyone, and we've said this to the county, we've said it to Rio Vista, we've said it to Susun, we've said it to other people, is we care about building We care about building a great place. We care about building great neighborhoods. We care about building a dynamic place that grows quickly. We care about bringing a lot of employment here.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a strong perspective on should it be in an unincorporated county, should it be Suisun, should it be Rio Vista, should it be some combination of that. We want to build it, we want to make it great, and we want to show that California can build again, and we want to show that we can do it on a reasonable timeline. I mean, you look at some of these projects that are happening in California; they've taken 20 years to entitle,
Mm-hmm.
and then people are people are asking, well, why do the homes cost so much? Well, if you spend 20 years paying consultants and lawyers, and it's a lawsuit after a lawsuit and permit after permit, and you have to carry the land the whole time, what it means is by the end of it, you have to build really expensive homes to make any money.
Mm-hmm.
And we've created a land use system in California that isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that it's not working because you can go to a Lennar subdivision, and you can look at the one in, name a city in Solano County. You can look at the one in Stockton. You can look at the one in Reno. You can look at the one in Boise, and you can look at the one in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
They all look the same.
Mm-hmm. Cookie cutter.
They all look the same, and that I'm not saying that as that being bad, but I'm saying that as in the only difference between them is that the California ones cost $200,000 more per house, and a big part of the reason is the one in Dallas or the one in Boise went from an idea to being built in 3 or 4 years, and the one in California took 20.
Mm-hmm.
And so the system that we have is not actually producing better neighborhoods. It's producing worse neighborhoods because they are more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a more complicated system, but it actually produced better places, maybe we can have a discussion and you can argue it. But we have no evidence that that's the case. And so what we are trying to show is that California can build on a reasonable timeline. And that also matters for employers. And the shipyard is a really good example of this. When we introduced the idea on, it was about a month ago, kind of more broadly, I posted a thread on x.com, which went viral. 1,000 people retweeted it. It was retweeted by the White House. 1.4 million people saw it. And there was a really depressing thing that happened in the comments. So the comments were overwhelmingly positive. But if you looked at the negative comments, basically all of them said the same thing. This is an amazing idea.
Mm-hmm.
It will be great for Solano County. It will be great for California. It will be great for America. And it will never happen in California because California cannot build anything. It's going to get killed by some kind of a permit. And so if we want shipyards in California, if we want new cities in California, we're going to have to figure out how to permit things in 2, 3, 4 years instead of 20.
Right. Well, I mean, and that's a great point that we have no time to waste. You know, this California, we're proudly the fifth largest economy in the world, and we're losing so much
Mhm.
talent because it's just too expensive to just simply be alive in this state. What are the implications of if this project can't get built? Then what do the students of Solano College have to look forward to if they don't have a community like this or a project like this developed and for them to strive towards?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another thing that gets lost in the discussion about the impacts of the project. People don't disappear; they have to go somewhere, right?
Mhm.
And if we don't build this here, it's not like those homes are gonna get built in Vacaville, right? Or Dixon. That's not the case. They might get built in Fresno, so they might go to Fresno. Much more likely, they're gonna get built in Phoenix or Dallas or anywhere in the part of the country where people are actually building. And I don't think that's a good outcome for anyone. Um, it's it's clearly not a good outcome for the families whose kids move away and they get to see them way less.
Mhm.
It's also not a good outcome for, let's say, the environment. I mean, I know some of the questions about the project are, well, okay, you're going to be converting some open land into development, and what about the impact on all of this construction on the climate or whatever it is? Well, if you care about sustainability and the climate, then you should really be supporting the new city. Because if those people, instead of living there, if they move and they buy a home in Arizona, their impact on the environment is going to quadruple. I mean, if someone who would have lived here moves to Phoenix, they're going to buy a much bigger home, which is going to run air conditioning 24/7, essentially, 8 months out of the year, um, on a grid that is much less renewable. So the grid in Phoenix has a much higher impact. They're going to use a lot more water for landscaping and generally in that environment. They're going to drive a bigger car probably, and they're going to drive it longer. And they're going to they're going to work in an office that is air conditioned 8 months out of the year. So there's a lot of evidence that the environmental footprint of someone moving from a temperate climate like California and Solano County to a place like Dallas or Phoenix is radically worse. And so I think the nuance in some of the discussions around should we have any greenfield development and where should it be is that real life is complicated. There's trade-offs, and you have to look at the whole picture. You can't just say, well, you are converting some grazing land into development, and I don't want that. Because the reality is, well, if we don't do it, a lot of other things will happen that you will like less. One of those, by the way, is if we don't, because we're building a medium density compact community, we can put about 4 times as many homes on a square mile of land as you would otherwise. And so what that means is if we don't build it, then to accommodate the same number of people, you have to build on 4 square miles somewhere else. And so all of these trade-offs are nuanced and I think need to be part of the discussion.
Of course. And of course, we America's been building homes for centuries now. We have plenty of case studies to go after what worked and what didn't work. And of course, with the influence of California, if we can prove that a project like this is feasible and that it works, it's without a doubt going to expand not just to the rest of the state, but possibly beyond the country, where we can start to build efficient cities instead of it's been proven time and time again that the denser the population, the better it is for the environment, and the more cost effective it is on our power grids and etc.
And 100%. I mean, I think the other part of it is just to put some numbers on it. If you ask people in California about what proportion of the state do you think is urbanized? So California has about 100 million acres. If you ask people what proportion of that is covered with roads and factories and homes, and you get to count everything, parking lots, whatever it is. I've done that experiment. I've asked people in big rooms when we've given events. Most people say somewhere between 15 and 25%. They think that about 15 to 25% of California is urbanized. The actual number is 6%. It's one of the lowest rates in the entirety of the country. There's lots of places on the East Coast where it's in the 20s and in some cases even in the 30s. California is really, really low. Another locally, again, some people worry with the city that it might influence this sense of open space and agriculture and the heritage that is here in Solano County. Here's the reality. Solano County is about 500,000 acres. The new city, the developed footprint of it is about 10,000 acres. It's about 5,000 acres of parks and greenbelt. That means that it's 2% of the county. You think right now the county is about 86% open space? So even if we built the entire city, which will take 40 years, it would reduce the amount of open space in Solano County from 86% to 84%. We would still have a lot of open space. It would still have that character, but the difference is people's kids could afford to live here, and we would have shorter commutes, and have this real engine of economic dynamism and opportunity. And I think that's the trade-off that we should be talking about.
Right. It sounds like there's a big misconception of just how much land we have available to actually build on. It makes no sense to leave this land undeveloped when it's perfectly suitable for this type of undertaking, when this is arguably one of the most expensive real estate markets in the world. and that's only one misconception. I'd like to dispel a few. So let me start with this first one. So you're not a spy,
That's
correct?
right.
You're not a
That's right.
spy who's trying to purchase the land around Travis Air Force Base.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
I have to say that that theory was the dumbest theory that I've heard in a
that's
long
why I
time.
start with it.
But no, look, I mean, if you're trying to do a land assembly, you would do it confidentially. That's not just us. When the University of California is buying a building, they often buy it confidentially,
Hmm.
anonymously. They don't want everyone to know that you're doing it.
Hmm.
But we did provide all of the information to the Treasury. We have been through all of the vetting by the Department of Defense, and that has been resolved a long time ago.
Yeah, I think we can't fault the average, I don't know, keyboard warrior for not understanding basic business practices.
Yeah, that's right.
But obviously you're strictly adherent to those laws. Let's go over some of these other misconceptions that we can just do away with forever.
That's right.
So go ahead.
Um, I mean, I would say um, there's the media loves this term tech utopia, and they've talked about a tech utopia and a tech city, and they talk about um, we building some kind of new systems of governance or whatever it is. If you look at the actual plans, if you look at what we've put forward, it's none of it. You look at the plans, the city looks like Charleston or Savannah. It looks old rather than new. You don't see any it's not Jetsons. I mean, people like these examples. And then the most radical idea that we've had in terms of governance is that once we've done the permitting, once we've done the zoning, once we've done the environmental review, once we've spent millions and millions of dollars on all of it, and once the city has been approved, if you want to build a home and you buy a lot, then you should be able to get a building permit in 90 days.
Hmm.
That's the most radical idea that we have for governance. I would say the other one that people still worry about is there's a sense that we want to approve the project and then sell it and then disappear. And that's just completely wrong. I mean, you look at everyone who works on this team, from me to the urban planning team, to the business development team, to our community teams. Everyone really believes in it. Everyone wants to live there one day, and people want to spend decades of their life building it. And so um, we are here to stay, and we really just care about building something great that I think it will be a deeply. When you ask what it might look like in 10 years, I imagine how profoundly optimistic it would be if in 10 years there are 20,000 people living there in wonderful neighborhoods, and there's kids running in the street, and you've got little town squares, and there's some old man like my dad sitting and sipping coffee and complaining about politics or whatever it is that they do. And you have some sports fields, and you can see new neighborhoods being built up, and there's more people moving in them, and there's employment, and companies have come in, and Solano County is this economic miracle success story in California of doing things differently. And it's given California some of its mojo back when we can actually do things. And there's ships being built. And I mean, in 10 years, you could actually have ships completed that have been built there that are now the USS Solano could be in service somewhere. I just think it would be an incredibly optimistic place, and that's what we're excited about.
Yeah, I mean, to the idea that you would just flip this for a profit, that's just a shallow business move. But I had the pleasure of speaking with Natri at one of these the organizing events last
Mhm.
year, and she said something that really struck with me. Um, Businesses come and go, but cities are forever,
Mhm.
and I
That's
guess
true.
that fits into the
That
name
is
of
that.
California
That is true.
forever. Um, I guess we just have a few more
Mhm.
questions before we wrap this up. So you were on the ballot for 2024,
Mhm.
and you've come to an agreement with Solano County that
Mhm.
it would be on the midterm ballot in 2026. What are some of the plans? I know that there are some environmental impact reports that need to be made. Where's the progress on that right now?
Yeah, so we've progressed the technical studies that are needed for that materially. Um, I would say right now what we are trying to figure out is there's the discussion about, do we do this in the county? Is it in one of the cities that have shown an interest in the annexations? And then if it's in the county is also looking at updating its general plan. And so the general plan is expiring in 2028. Staff recently started the process for, I believe, hiring the consultants to look at the update of the general plan. And so some of the discussions that we're having with the county are about, would we do this as a separate project, or does it make sense for this to be rolled up into the larger general plan update? And so I think a lot of this is going to become clearer over the last few months, and then we'll make sure that we update the community on that. But right now, we're in discussions with the county, Rio Vista, and Susun City to figure out what's the best way to move this forward.
Perfect. Well, I guess my last question before we finally let you go. I know this was a long, very fruitful conversation, so we appreciate your time. How can anyone who's involved in this project help your endeavors and make sure that it gets passed in 2026?
I mean, I think talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, talk to your elected officials about it, about why do you like it, why do you believe in it. If you have concerns about any of it, then contact us and tell us about your concerns. My email is jan@californiaforever.com. People can always email me. And one of the tragedies with land use in California, this has been studied in scientific papers and documented very well, is that there's a tragedy where when it comes to approving new development, the conversation often gets hijacked by a small group of very vocal people who typically are against it, when most people like the idea. And so it's really important that people speak up and they say, no, I like this project and here is why I like it. And they tell their friends, they tell their family members, they tell elected officials, because it's important that the overall sentiment in the community is reflected in the process, and the conversation isn't dominated by a small number of people who protest against basically everything.
Right, right. Well, there's a lot to look forward to. One last bonus question. What would the name of the city be?
We don't know yet. If you have any ideas, then let us know. Of course, there's a question if it's in the county, it probably has a name. If it goes into Rio Vista or Susun City or combination of the two, then it would be Rio Vista or Susun.
Right. Well, I mean, I have a little bit of a half-hearted, a light suggestion. If there's a New York,
Let's hear it.
If there's a New York and there's a New Mexico, let's call this New California.
That's pretty good, actually. That's really good.
I mean, well, let's throw that in the ring. But
Let's do
Mr.
it.
Jan Sramek, it's been an
It was a
absolute
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Again, my name is Nathaniel Thomas, and that wraps up this very special edition of On Campus.
If you are interested in a career in sports broadcasting,
whether you're commentating a live game
or hosting your own TV show,
for more information, contact Greg Poff. That's me at solano.edu.
we hope to see you here next semester. And remember,
It's more than just sports, it's an education.